So you were modeling, you're working for Raymond, you're basically staying out of trouble, you're staying super busy. And then how did, we got to get into, then the first hit of crack happened and it derailed kind of everything, right?
So when I was 15, early 15, I started smoking weed and started getting my hands on a lot of weed. I had a friend, my brother's friend was providing that weed for me. And I was selling ounces of weed at 15. I turned 16. I go to Block Island for the little bit of my summer. I stopped drinking a little. I come back from Block Island, and not my dentist, but a dentist who lived in the building that my mother owned some condos and my grandmother lived in. His name was Carl. Carl was a dentist in Cranston, but he used to buy weed from me. So I sold him ounces of weed every once in a while. This just started. So he calls me and says, hey, I want an ounce of weed. So I bring it over to his condo. It's a fall day. I just got back from Block Island. It was like September. I'll never forget it. I can visually feel the breeze going, like the New England off the bay breeze, because this condominium was right on the bay. I come into the condo, and I drop the weed down, and I see this Pyrex. Like Pyrex is a glass. It's like a glass tube that you can heat up and it won't crack. It's called Pyrex. So I come in and he's got this crazy zigzag Pyrex thing, and he's got a torch in his hand, and he looks kind of like, like you got to try this. And I thought it was hash. I was like, and when you're young, you're just like, yeah, all right. I'm already smoking. Like, yeah, I didn't know. I didn't even think twice. And he hands me the thing, and then he took it back from me and he heated it up. He heated up this big fucking Pyrex thing, and then he took a rock and he dropped it in, and the rock went in and started smoking and filling up. And he's like, okay, now suck. And I sucked that smoke all the way through the zigzag, and I took a big fucking hit. And I opened the sliding glass door and went out into the fall weather in New England and went. And the whole world stopped. And all the trauma that I had, what we just talked about, a lot of it was trauma, had gone away. And I was like, whoa. It was like finding my golden slipper. And not more than 3 seconds after I took the hit, I wanted another one. And I turned around and I was like, I want some. Give me some. And I ended up spending the money that I had used for weed. I took weed money and bought it with weed money. And that was where freebase or crack, whatever you want to call it, took a hold. That's where it was the beginning. Hey guys, what's happening? Listen, the Rhode Island Red podcast is here, and I just want to tell you that the first few episodes are a journey into the beginning of my story. So what I suggest is you hang in there and watch the story. And then let me tell you, there's some gold nuggets along the way of this river. So just, you know what I mean? If you open your mind up and just tag in, then you're going to really enjoy the ride. Hey, and thanks a lot for watching Rhode Island Red Podcast. And listen, come on to the journey. It's going to be a great one.
Okay, here we go. Look, I've tried all the groups, NA, AA, Scientology. If you want to get on the wagon and stay on the wagon, come down to the fourth wall. They'll listen to you because they have to listen to you. It's in the rules. And the bathrooms will make you feel like you're in your favorite crack house. Fourth wall comedy.
I can't do this. I can't.
Okay, how about this? They'll listen to you because they have to listen to you. It's in the rules. Go to fourth wall. Tell Joe that Sean sent you. What do you think?
I think you should let me do it the way. As you all know, I'm an ex-crackhead. How do I stay off crack? Fourth wall comedy. Why? Because I've switched out my crack pipe for a microphone. I've switched out the crack house for fourth wall studio. It's very simple. I suggest if you're smoking crack or doing anything else that's not good for your lungs, I say, put it down, head on down the fourth wall, get your $5 bill ready, and let's start the new program. Where is the new you anyways?
Fourth Wall Comedy, the crack house of comedy clubs.
This guy's an asshole. Joe, he did that.
Podcast, episode 1. We're here.
Yeah.
We're doing this, Sean.
All right, man. It's good to be here.
All right. So, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's start at the beginning, like how we even met each other, you know? Like,
I believe we met each other at Hollywood Comedy. It was the first time I saw you.
No, it was the Fourth Wall.
Oh, it was the fourth wall.
Yeah. So that's where we really know each other. That's the connection here.
Absolutely.
The Fourth Wall, it's a world famous comedy studio.
Oh, yeah. Listen.
In LA.
Highest of quality. And I mean that.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, yes. Like, in a lot of ways, that we say it with facetiousness, but in truth, it probably is one of the only places in LA that's actually developing comics, and that's because it's Joe Menente. He's really, in a weird way, one day people are gonna look back at the Fourth Wall and Joe Menente and see that he, in his weird, against all odds way, actually really brought something to comedy, the history of comedy.
Yeah.
Because he's the first person in LA who started the slotted mics. That wasn't even a thing. And then all these other copycats came along and really jumped on that. But none of those places are really invested the way Joe is. No,
Joe's like a boots on the ground. Let me tell you, the first thing I love about Joe is his work ethic, and that he's not just as a club owner or a restaurant owner. I don't like absentee owners. That's a big red flag for me in any business. So when I saw and I fell into the lovely Easter basket of Fourth Wall, which my heart belongs to Fourth Wall, just so you know.
So does mine. I mean, if we have allegiance, that's our home club.
That's our home. If you were to say that's our home team, that's our home team.
That's our home team. But go on.
So that's why I have nothing but respect for Joe and Fourth Wall, because he really is. It's almost to the point where I don't want to tell anybody anymore. It's like Block Island. I'm telling so many people. It's like, we always want to keep some things a secret. And in a way, you'll have to figure out the secret of Joe Menente, and that takes time.
Yeah. He's an enigma.
Yeah.
There ain't no question about it.
Absolutely.
But one thing we both really, and we'll never tell this to his face, but we really respect and admire Joe Menente.
Yeah. Don't tell him to his face.
Never tell that to his face, you know?
We don't want him to really know how much we care about him.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's how we met. We met doing comedy.
Yeah, we met doing comedy, and, I say divine intervention.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, as we get into this story, divine intervention has come into my life many times. In recovery, also on the other side of the coin in the throes of crack addiction and alcoholism.
Yeah. And hence Father Mahoney. You've been connected somehow to the divine in a weird way. You know? It's interesting that crackheads and people with mental health problems, me and you, basically, are somehow connected to that, you know?
But that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
I mean, me and you would have been on the bus together.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. We're cut from the same cloth, Sean.
Mine might be burned by a crack pipe, but we are.
Yeah. So that's how we got to know each other. And for anybody who doesn't know, Sean has a million stories. Every time I see you on stage, Sean, like, it's basically a new experience. Like, a lot of comics go up and they're working out a set and they'll do the same jokes over and over and they'll try to craft them. With Sean, you'll hit those points, but I mean, you could talk for 10 hours without repeating anything. And everything will be an interesting story about your life. And that's how we got into this podcast, because that's the perfect vehicle for you. And that's what this is really about. And we got to get into it. We got to get into the beginning.
The beginning?
Yeah, the very beginning.
Where would we want to start?
I want to start with, where are you from?
I'm
Rhode
from,
Island.
Guys, I'm from Warwick, Rhode Island. That's where I grew up. which is off Narragansett Bay in a great part of Rhode Island called Gaspee Plateau. Yeah. And Gaspee Plateau is where the HMS Gaspee, the first English tack ship to ever come into our waters, this is this is 1772, not 1776, with the Boston Tea Party. We're talking 1772 for the first blow for freedom. So I come from the neighborhood where we burned down the first English tack ship called the HMS Gaspee. And I'm a revolution. Like, I come from a fucking lineage of revolutionaries.
When did your family come from, like, Ireland? Like, do you have a
generations.
Yeah?
Generations.
So you've been in a long time. What number state is Rhode Island, by the way? Do you have any? Like, I have no idea.
What do you mean, what number?
In terms of joining the union or whatever.
I think it was. That's a good question.
Yeah,
I should know that.
I should know that too. But
yeah.
I went to public school.
It might be top 3, I would imagine.
It's pretty high up there. Like,
yeah.
Okay, so you're Rhode Island born and bred.
Born and bred.
Yeah, and 100% Irish.
100%.
Wow.
Sean Timothy Mahoney, born 1966 by Ruth Elizabeth Mahoney and Tom Mahoney.
You're not going to believe this, Sean, but that's the first time I've heard what the T stands for. It's Timothy.
It is.
It's Timothy. That's where the T.
That my street cred just
Sean
went
T.
right out the door. It's not Tornado. It's Timothy.
I always call you Sean T. That's what I call you.
Yeah.
But now I know what it actually is. Anyway, so that's the origin story. By the way, I want to go back. Like, Sean is much more than a crackhead. You know, that's a big part of what shaped you. That's a huge part of your experience and the stories. But your stories go far beyond that. It really is about finding a passion, facing all the pain that comes with that. Yeah. And I think that's really what your story is about. Yeah. You said something on stage, this was a couple days ago, that I thought it was great. You know, it was basically this, you were a performer from when you were a kid, you knew that.
I knew.
You know?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, your mom kind of, didn't want you to do that. I don't know if she didn't want to, but
when I was younger, I was a model.
Yeah.
I was a child model for all, like, Peerless, and I was in if you ever see a big Sunday paper, in the middle of those Sunday papers are a lot of advertisements. So back in the late 70s and early 80s, those were full. So I did Cherry and Webb, Peerless, Sears catalog, all of that stuff.
Well, how old were you when you started with that?
12.
And you did that at
maybe 11.
Yeah, but like, this is the thing that people don't necessarily know. Like, your mom ran a bar in Providence?
Yeah, my mom opened up a bar in 1972 called El Elizabeth on Skid Row in Providence with the help of Mayor Dawley and a city loan and some family money. And she opened up a place called El Elizabeth, was like this most beautiful boutique place, Irish coffees. It was called the Recipe of Romance in Providence. It became very successful and managed to last 42 years in business.
So that was the family business.
The family ground. Yeah.
So that anybody from Providence knows Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah.
And she got in there before that area was...
Before the Renaissance of Providence, if you know the Renaissance of Providence and Waterfire and all of the Renaissance that Buddy Cianci brought to the city with all the federal money and the blood, sweat, and tears of us. Yeah. My mom was the first business on South Main Street before. This is where Brown University is, RISD. This is before all of these places started to grow.
So she was right at the
she was the pioneer of South Main Street.
So your mom was a very well-respected woman in the city of Providence.
She was my mom was also an alcoholic. She got sober when I was 2 years old.
Yeah.
And she started the Day at a Time group in Providence, Rhode Island. Yeah. And that group was the first AA meeting in the city. And what she did was, very unique story, she went to AA, but there wasn't enough AA meetings. It was kind of like not enough open mics for comedians.
Yeah.
So she was like, I got to do something. And if you know anything about my lineage or my personality, we don't really wait for too much. Yeah. My mother went right to the governor and told the governor, what's going on with St. Patrick's School across the street? And the governor was like, I don't know. We got a janitor in there and the heat's on, but there's no one in the building. And she says, I want to put AA in the building. Can the state give us the building? Although that was against, you could donate to AA because it wasn't, and they gave her the building with a janitor, and she started AA meetings, and that was the beginning of the Day at a Time group. So she got sober, opened up the Day at a Time group with the help of the governor, and then 5 years into sobriety, she opened a bar.
Yeah. No, that's like before.
And then everyone in AA was like, "Oh, how dare you open a bar?" My mother was like, "What do you mean, how dare I? I'm sober now. This is what we do."
That's unbelievable. Of course, like.
and she really was a pioneer, and she brought the Irish coffee, and she brought romance to the city, and everyone from, I met Frank Sinatra. And when I was 16, my first gin and tonic was with Buddy Cianci, Frank Sinatra, and my father at the bar of Elizabeth's. Peggy Fleming. I've had pumpkin pie with Robert Redford, with me and my mom and Robert Redford at Elizabeth's. I've had conversations on blow. I'm sorry, Maya Angelou, but I sat with Maya Angelou like we're sitting now and talked for 15 minutes, and Maya grabbed my hand.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
She was concerned.
Yeah.
So I had a very unique place that I took over, that I was very, I was, was
so it
very,
stayed in the family for a really long time.
Yeah, I took it over in 95.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I mean, with your mom, like, how much of you is in your mom?
Oh.
There's a lot?
Yeah. You got the body of my father.
Yeah.
But you got everything else as my mom.
Yeah, the energy, the whole
the
thing,
energy,
the restless,
the pioneer in me, the not willing to wait for a gatekeeper.
Yeah,
the willing to open up my, stop my own weed whacker and put my own path ahead of me.
The get shit done part of you that comes from your mom.
I've always been a get shit done guy.
Yeah,
there's always been that, no matter what. And going to the crack addiction.
Yeah,
let me tell you. You can't be a crackhead without getting shit done.
They're an industrious people.
We're very industrious. Let me tell you something. You can't change. I was so industrious, I was switching out night deposit boxes on the wall for my own night deposit box, if you can understand that.
The hardest working people in the drug scene are crackheads.
And suburban, there's a difference between an inner city crackhead and a suburban crackhead.
Yeah, well, explain.
Suburban crackheads have to figure it out on... they're white, generally white, and they have to get into the inner city. Yeah. So just that alone is a problem. Yeah. And the inner city guys can't come into the suburb because that's a real problem because of racism.
Yeah, yeah. So you were a suburban guy.
I was a suburban guy.
And you had to go into the inner city.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get into that, I'm sure. But no, like, it is interesting to just kind of get into the history of your mom a little bit, because I think it explains a lot about what the journey for you, the connection to that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So your mom, like, she was an alcoholic for years.
Yeah.
Right? So when, do you have any recollection of her?
Never.
Of that? So when growing up, you knew her as kind of a badass running her own business, which at that time, for a woman to do that and run a bar like that, also as a former alcoholic running a bar, like, she got shit done. Yeah. And then let's talk about Buddy real quick. So Buddy was the mayor of Providence during that time.
Well, Buddy became mayor in 1972, the year my mother opened up Elizabeth's. We got our liquor license from Mayor Dawley. The Irish used to run the city of Providence. And in 1972, Dawley was done, made all his money. Yeah. And he came from a very wealthy background. Yeah. So that's when Buddy Cianci came in and became mayor in 72.
Okay, so Dorley was the mayor before Buddy Cianci.
Yes.
And Dorley, what's your connection to Mayor Dorley?
Well, my brother Jay was his driver.
Okay. All right. And he was obviously connected with your mom and knew there was a connection, it seems like.
There's an Irish connection. My uncle Mel Lynch was a bar owner. I wouldn't say Irish mafia, but they were the Irish on Broad Street. And he had all the bars on Broad Street. So there was this good old boy. Rhode Island back in the day was a good old boy. You know this guy. Yeah. You know Sean. You know John. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It's all in the family.
Everybody's there. What do you need? A welder?
Yeah.
You know Johnny the welder.
Yeah. All right. What about your dad?
My dad was a plumber.
Yeah.
He had Mahoney. He came from a family of, my grandfather was a plumber. Yeah. And they had Mahoney's Plumbing in Providence, Rhode Island in the 50s, 60s. And my dad moved into private plumbing, into union plumbing, where he became a union boss.
And what does that really mean at that time? Like, this was like in the early 70s?
Well, late 70s, 80s.
So if you were a union boss, like, does that mean you're connected? Is that implied, basically?
Well, connected, that means you've got power to put people to work. Yeah. And you've got a sense, there's a power there.
So then, I mean, like, in terms of corruption, how common is that if you're a union head?
All right, I'll leave it to you like this. Yeah. My dad took me to Seabrook. Yeah. In, I think it was New Hampshire. It was a power plant. Yeah. And it was a Friday. I got to visit him on a union job up there. He was up there for 5 months. Yeah. On Friday, he was like, we were driving from the hotel into the job site, and there was a line of guys who I thought were waiting for the craft services or the truck, the food truck. They weren't waiting for the food truck. They were waiting for my father to pull in. Yeah. And this was Friday. And as we pulled in, there was a line of guys just kept throwing envelopes in my father's car, into my lap. Probably 130 of them.
Wow.
Every Friday. So not only was there it's like, Mark, if I put you to work on a film and I say you're going to make $1 million, I want 100,000. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so that's how that goes.
That's just how the world works. Yeah.
So that's, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm, that was a very eye-opening situation.
So you noticed
where my dad didn't even want the money. Yeah. He just was in a position where this is how it goes. It's like a cop that's on the take, but my dad wasn't on the take. Yeah. He just was a boss.
Yeah. And it's like, and if you question it, then you're now eyes are on you. It's like, what's wrong with this guy?
I don't think anyone was questioning anything. You know what I mean? It was, my dad was a really easygoing, different than me, light and breezy guy. You couldn't get, if 20 guys didn't give him the envelope, it wouldn't have mattered to him. He wasn't that guy.
I see.
He wasn't like Tony Soprano, where's my envelope? He was more or less just Tom Mahoney going through life.
All right. Not like your mom, though. Your mom, she's like...
My mom was kick-ass.
Yeah. And she had that reputation, like, around town?
Yeah, my mom had a very, reputation of, she was well respected.
Yeah. So you growing up, I mean, it sounds like you came from a solid family, a well respected, like probably upper middle class, like that. So that
I came up now when Elizabeth's opened in 72. Yeah. How old? I was 6 or 7. Yeah. So we had money and we were doing well. But once Elizabeth's opened up, forget about it. The money started coming in, and things changed fast. Instead of a Ford in the driveway, it was a 77 Peach Eldorado. The house was getting redone. Things were happening. I was being shipped off to a private school, out of a public school, modeling every weekend for the model. Things were changing rapidly.
How old were you around then?
Where are we at?
When, like, your mom opened the bar and now
72.
Money's coming in and things are starting to change.
So you're talking, when I'm 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, 11, 12, those years were the creme de la creme.
I see.
Because family came into money, boats, you know what I mean? Yeah. My brother, you know what I mean? My sister and my brother, they were living a great life. We were all... And it was Rhode Island. Whether we were in Newport, we owned Elizabeth. Elizabeth was if you owned a place in Providence and it was successful and you had a reputation, that carried you wherever you went. So if I went to Newport, they're like, that's Mahoney from Elizabeth.
I see.
That was like, you know what I mean? Like you didn't pay for nothing. Yeah. You were given the best table.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Sean. When did it all go wrong?
Well, here we go.
We're going to get into that.
All right.
But really, so, were you a happy kid, Sean? Were you happy?
A happy kid? Yeah, I was a happy kid. I had a lot of, you know what I mean? And like I said, I grew up in Gaspee Plateau with the Gaspee days. And We didn't have, we did things like iceberging.
Yeah.
Like we get on icebergs when the tide came up and break these big icebergs and float around Narragansett Bay. Yeah. I mean, we do crazy stuff, like hop on the back of cars in the snow. Yeah. But I was a happy kid, Yeah.
And you got brothers and sisters, right? How many brothers and sisters?
I mean, I have two brothers. One Jay Penny who passed on, Thomas Mahoney Jr., and then Kim Greenberg.
Older. Everybody?
Everybody.
You're the baby in the family?
Yeah.
Did they have any issues like growing up, like in terms of addiction or anything like that?
Oh, well, yeah. Like, listen, my sister was the first to, you know what I mean? There was a lot of cocaine around in the late 70s, you know what I mean? In Newport and all of that. And, they had a lot of addiction problems coming into it. You know what I mean? There was cocaine around. There was no doubt about that. Yeah. But that was all par for the course.
Yeah. All right.
It was par for the course at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like everybody at some
Everybody's
point,
family had somebody in it who was doing drugs.
Yeah.
And when the coke came in 77, 78, 79, everybody was partying.
So for you, like, because we're gonna get into this obviously, but you're a connected guy, or you have that history,
Yeah, it's not a secret that I've lived a life that had to do with organized crime.
So it's like, how do we go from this, upper middle class kid who's a nice kid, some ways idyllic childhood, like how do we get into that?
Okay, so this is where it comes into Rhode Island. Yeah. And when there's an old cartoon that if you come to Rhode Island, you're going to have lobsters and meet mobsters. Yeah. Okay? So Rhode Island was very small. Everyone was connected in some outskirt way to something, to that realm. So Rhode Island always had a reputation. So, no matter, you could be just a regular kid working somewhere and you'd find yourself in the middle of a mob joint. You know what I mean? For instance, my mother said, go down to O'Brien's Driftwood. And in O'Brien's Driftwood was a Irish gangster bar owned by the O'Brien brothers, okay? And it was like these guys, well-connected. They worked for Patriarca. They had a green Cadillac in the back that said P-Mob on the back. If you were connected to the mob, P-Mob, you had a plate that said P-Mob on it. So these guys had that plate. And so my mom says, go down there. They need somebody to clean the club in the morning, Saturday and Sunday morning. So I go down to the club on Saturday morning, and they give me a broom. I run into one of the brothers, and this place had a reputation. As a kid, it wasn't a place I was going to be hanging around. You know what I mean? So when I went in there, it was like a museum. So I had to find the owner in the office. He said, there's a broom in the closet. And I said, the broom? And I looked at the floor of the restaurant, and the floor of the restaurant looked like a bomb had hit it. And he wanted me to, I was like, and he's like, yeah, sweep it, use the broom. And I looked at the broom. The broom was literally like, you ever seen a brush broom?
Yeah.
It was like a half of that. So I spent the next 3 hours vacuuming this fucking place.
Or sweeping it.
Sweeping it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I shouldn't have said vacuum. Sweeping it. And I'm like, this fucking blows. I'm like, there's got to be a better way, right? And I was scared to death to even ask the guy anything. It was kind of like that, kid, keep your mouth shut and do this. And so the next day, I went home that night, and I was like, fuck this, I'm bringing my vacuum. And I took my mother's vacuum the next day, and I walked it down Narragansett Parkway, and I went into O'Brien's Driftwood, and the back door was open. I came right in, and I plugged the vacuum in. He was in the office. I plugged the vacuum in, and I start vacuuming. After I pick up the straws and the big shit.
Yeah.
And I see the door. The back door's like this darkly lit doorway with like the light from the outside, but it comes into a dark, and I'm in the dark, and I see the other brother fucking looking at, like, he came through the door, and he just starts rushing me. And I'm vacuuming, and I'm like, holy shit. And I'm like, he's like, where'd you get the fucking... And he says, where'd you get the fucking... And he just turns around and rushes back to the office, where he goes into the office in a full-on fucking melee. And I'm like, I stop the vacuum and I'm like, holy shit. And they're fighting in the office. One of the brothers, they bust out of the office. Now one of them runs down that hallway into the kitchen while the other one's chasing him into the kitchen. Now I'm like, oh, I turn the vacuum cleaner back on. And I'm like, this is too much for me. And all of a sudden I hear pop. And I fucking like vacuum cleaner's going, and then I see them come out of the brother comes out of the fucking office holding his hip. The other brother shot his own brother because he thought he bought me a vacuum cleaner to clean the club. Yeah. And I guess this vacuum thing had been an issue for a long time. Yeah. And just my luck,
You walked in on that.
I walked in on it.
You didn't know the history that they had with the vacuum. These guys did not. One of the brothers really did not like vacuums.
Yeah, the story goes is down the road is one of the brothers wanted a vacuum because this had been an ongoing issue with the cleaners, and that's why I was called in, because my mom thought I wasn't going to complain. Yeah. I don't know why my mom didn't think I was going to grab her vacuum and fucking bring it down there. That was the most logical situation of the problem.
Yeah, you were just trying to get shit done.
I was trying to get shit done.
But you didn't realize you walked into a ongoing family feud.
And that story didn't come out until a couple of years ago. Yeah. So I knew how to keep my mouth shut. That was the beginning.
Yeah, that was the beginning.
That was the beginning.
Yeah, in terms of, so what did you prove when that you kept?
I didn't want to prove anything.
Because what happened afterwards? I mean, did you go home?
I went home and I talked to my mom. I told my mom what happened, and she's like, "Did you say anything to anybody?" I'm like, "Absolutely not."
And that was the key thing. That's what she needed to hear.
She needed to hear that because she didn't want any problems either.
Yeah. So, because if word got out about that, that would be a problem.
Yeah, probably wouldn't have been good. And listen, I kept my mouth shut on that one.
Yeah.
For a long time.
But do you think your mom had any idea? Like, she knew that these guys are gangsters, right? Like,
yeah.
But it was just normal to send a kid. Like, it's just a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a big. Yeah.
Yeah, it was par for the course, I guess.
How old were you then? Roughly.
15.
You were 15. That was your first real job, but that was also.
I was 15. I was 15.
But was that the first time you saw violence like that?
Oh yeah.
That's why it was.
Well, I had seen some minor violence, because I went to Moses Brown, so I used to take the city bus when I was in 5th grade. Yeah. I used to take the bus into the city at 5th grade. You ever seen what a 5th grader looks like? Yeah. You're not putting them on a bus to take 2 transfers to you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was well versed.
Yeah. So you're already kind of streetwise.
Oh, very streetwise against pedophiles, all that shit. Yeah. I had rocks in my pockets. Yeah. Because downtown Providence, a pedophile would pull up and be like, roll down the window, and I just pull out a rock and start fucking throwing rocks at his car.
Oh shit. So all right, let's get back. Let's back up a little bit, because I think somehow this young sweet kid, is gonna cross paths with, with gangsters, So when did you enter that world?
Well, remember, my mother owned Elizabeth.
Yeah,
so I'm also working at O'Brien's.
Yeah,
but my mother's place, Elizabeth, was the creme de la creme of everybody: judges, gangsters, entertainers that came into the city, everybody, a smorgasbord. Elizabeth was kind of like Fourth Wall. Yeah. That when you walk into Fourth Wall, if you got a beef with somebody, it's not at Fourth Wall, meaning it was
neutral ground.
It was neutral ground.
Yeah.
So if you were a gangster, and you had a problem with that guy, a lawyer, you didn't fuck. It was all about whatever you were doing there. I don't know if you ever heard of the Klaus von Bülow trial.
No.
No?
No.
Well, Klaus von Bülow was the guy who murdered his wife in Newport. A big heiress. Yeah. Big famous trial. And Dershowitz, the lawyer, was his lawyer, got him off. Yeah. And during the trial, Superior Court's right across the street from Elizabeth, down just a block down. Yeah. So Elizabeth was so famous that Dershowitz and his team rented the back room with a curtain, and von Bülow rented the front of the room during the trial. Yeah. So during the trial, they wanted a place to go and sit and relax and enjoy some peace of mind. But Elizabeth was the number one place, so they had to split it up.
Yeah.
That's how famous the place was.
I mean, describe Elizabeth's a little bit. Like, what did it look like?
Well, if you walked into Elizabeth's, it had a stained glass window of a beautiful Bonnie Franks, who's an artist out of Martha's Vineyard. He does fused glass. Yeah. And we had a beautiful bluebird door with a very nice, beautiful door. You'd open it up and you'd see nothing but little sections of leather couches and different sections of almost like every section was different. Yeah. So the section on the left was called San Francisco as you walked in the door because the table and all the furniture in that section came from San Francisco. Yeah. On the right was called Arizona. All of the furniture and everything from there came from Sedona and all over Arizona. And then you would move in and you'd have these nice dark leather couches, little marble tables that all came from Italy. Every piece of furniture in there had been acquired through my mother's travels before she opened up Elizabeth's. Yeah. So it was this recipe of romance where everyone in Rhode Island from 1972 to 2010 had, if you were going to get engaged in Rhode Island, you took your fiance to Elizabeth's and you asked her to marry that. Over 1,000 engagements took place at Elizabeth's.
So it's just like a super classy,
super high end. We were like a Budweiser was $5.84 a Budweiser.
Yeah,
$5.
Wow.
So we were charging well over New York prices, so it wasn't about the drink.
Yeah.
You were paying for the ambiance and the situation.
Was there food or was it really
all fresh pastries that were made by my grandmother.
Wow. So anybody
Irish coffee and pastry was like the big thing. Have a nice Irish coffee or an international coffee or a cognac or a port.
I see. So it was like a nice place where you go. And everybody this was in Providence, right? Like,
yes.
Anybody in Providence during that time knew exactly what Elizabeth's was. All right, well, let's get into it. I know when you were a kid that at a certain point you got connected, you know? You got connected. And tell us that story. I've heard this story before, but tell us about how that happened.
All right. So in 6th grade, I used to work. The story is when I went to Moses Brown, we would have half days on Wednesday. Yeah. So now this is when I was really innocent and just I was innocent and just a prep kid. Yeah. I wore Izod. I had turned into like this preppy, and I would go to the arcade every Wednesday at 12 o'clock, because we only had half days. And one day it was I think it was 77.
Yeah. So you were like, what, 11?
It had to be 77 or 78. I was in 6th grade.
Yeah.
So how old was I in 6th grade?
I mean, usually people are about like 11 in 6th grade.
11?
Yeah, right around there.
Pretty young.
Yeah. So tell us the story. How did it happen?
So I go to the half day. I go to a place called Satin's Rings, which is owned by the Patriarca crime family, and it's an arcade. And that's what they were all into, pinball, and that was like a big thing for us, pinball. So when we walked in, there was disco playing on the air. And the disco was disco was so popular then. So when I walked in, I was like dancing as I walked into the place. And I was doing this, and I was kind of like, I was really dancing. I was getting into it, right? And I got my quarters out of the machine, and I went to the machine to put the quarter into the machine. And as I did it, when I touched the quarter to the metal slot, it went ding, 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 and rang up games on the pinball machine. And I was like, that's fucked up. I was like, holy shit. So I went like this again on the carpet for the static. And then I touched it again. It rang up more games. I went to another machine and did the same thing, and I was like, holy shit, this is good. So now all my friends from Moses Brown were at their arcade too, so I shared this information with them, and I tried to tell them, please don't, make it, next thing you know, everybody in the arcade, the guys at the door, these were like lapel guys, like gangster guys watching the kids, like babysitting kids in an arcade. So all of a sudden, every kid's doing this and ringing up the games. And the guys are freaking out. So they're grabbing the kids. And I'm at this point, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm like backing off. And they grab the kids and they all rat me out. They're like, oh, Sean told us. Yeah. So the guys grab me. And they literally grab me and they're like, what's your name? And they pull me in. I'm like, my name's Sean Mahoney. And they're like, Mahoney? They said, is your mom Ruth? And I'm like, yeah. And the guy was like, don't move. And I had like my backpack and I was like, I wasn't going anywhere. Well, apparently my brother Jay, not only did he drive for Dawley, he drove for Raymond Patriarca in the afternoon.
All right, let's explain that real quick. So Dorley was the mayor.
Not at this time, but
Yeah.
Jay had transferred over to still driving for Patriarca. By this time, Buddy Sancey's the mayor, but he's not driving for Buddy.
All right, well, we got to take about so Raymond Patriarca. So can you explain who that is?
He was the head of the New England crime family.
And so how many crime families are there in all of New England?
In New England.
In New England? And then what about the rest of, who else is there? So he was one of how many? 5 or 6?
No, there's only one. There's 5 families in New York and one that I will not speak about.
Yeah.
Only New England.
No kidding. So one runs all of New England and all the other ones are in New York, basically?
Yeah, Raymond ran everything from the New York-Connecticut line all the way down to the Canadian border.
And
that's why he was one of the most powerful bosses that came out of La Cosa Nostra.
So Raymond Patriarca was based in Rhode Island?
Yep.
And that's always where he operated out of?
Out of Coinomatic on Federal Hill. That's where, yeah.
And that was like a front for...
Well, it wasn't a front, it was a business.
It was a business.
It was a vending machine business. Pinball, cigarettes.
And so that's the connection. So is it Saturn's rings or Saturn's rings?
Saturn's.
Saturn's rings, like the
like
planet.
The planet.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you're there and you figured out how to hack these pinball machines.
Yes.
And you're like 10 or 11. And you're the kids...
I think I was I was 11.
You're about 11. And then... The kids, they all find you tell them about
it.
Well,
I gave them the info.
And then, so everybody's getting free games. And so that location was owned by Patriarca.
It was owned by Raymond.
It was owned by, so he had goons basically.
He had guys at the door babysitting teenage kids,
Yeah.
all different kind of people were coming in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But that was like just one of his, like, I'm assuming he had a lot of.
Well, he had cigarette machines in every bar.
But that was
pinball machines in every bar.
So that was his business. It was vending machines, pinball machines.
Yeah.
So he ran that spot. You just happened to go there. You happened to figure this thing out.
It was listen, like everything in my life, I stumbled upon this.
Yeah.
And everything, like it's almost like everything was written before me, but all of this stumbling, I kept being led into areas where I'd stumble into these kind of situations.
I mean, isn't it kind of amazing that, like, so you were dancing because you were listening to disco music?
Yeah, disco was so hot. I used to love disco.
And so somehow disco
got me into the mafia.
Into the mob. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it got me connected to the mafia.
Fucking disco. It never ends.
Yeah, it never
this is why people hate disco. All right, so you just, by random set of circumstances, you end up basically getting connected with the head of the New England crime family, but you don't know any of this yet. So right now, going back to the story, the goons grab you because you got ratted out by one of the other kids, and they're saying, "Hey, what's your name?"
These guys were freaked out.
Yeah,
how kids were running around.
Yeah,
and they were all doing like this.
They're like, "What the hell is?"
And
going
these
on?
guys were like stunned. They were like, "How is they?" It was like. It was kind of like the assembly line of Lucy had gone awry.
Yeah.
And they were like, ah!
So it's just a bunch of kids at a pinball arcade and a couple of goons.
Yeah,
they're
trying to control them. And then they were yelling, "Don't touch her, step away from the pinball machine." It was like, step away from the vehicle.
Yeah.
It was like, and they had me detained.
I got it. They figured you out. They found you. And then they're telling you, "Who are you?" And like, "Sean Mahoney."
Yeah. And now my mom owns Elizabeth at the time, very well connected.
So they knew who she was. And then
my brother's now literally at the moment I'm called that this is happening. My brother's driving is literally the driver for Raymond.
So that's the other.
And I don't know this.
Yeah.
Because I'm a kid.
So, but they figure out who you are, and then they know your brother. Is that basically what it is? So they know your brother because he's a driver for Raymond Patriarca.
Yes.
And you had no idea.
No
obviously.
idea. And remember, my brother's a real prankster, too. So he's like, oh, let's see what we... Because my brother knew I was privileged. Yeah. So I think in my way, this story, as it goes on, my brother was like, yeah, let's toughen him up. Let's scare him a little.
Yeah. So they call up... Who do they call up once they know who you are?
The guy called up Raymond at Coinomatic. And Raymond said, Jay's right here. Yeah. And they made an agreement to bring me down to Coinomatic and have a talk with me under my brother Jay's authorization. That he said, okay, it's okay to teach him a lesson. I don't know what lesson. I don't know what lesson they were going to teach me, but so they picked me up and they brought me down to Coinomatic. Where
your brother picked you up?
No, not my brother.
Yeah, who picked you up?
I think it was Nicky Bianco.
So one of Raymond's guys.
I think it was Nicky Bianco. No, my memory, it looked like Nicky Bianco.
And they said, hey, he's going to take you to go see Raymond.
Yeah, and they were like, and I'll never forget the ride. Yeah. I had fucking caused a lot of problems. Yeah. Like the doorman at the arcade was mad at me because he was dealing with chaos that I brought in there. The guy that I got into the car, who I think was Nicky Bianco, said, oh, you're in a lot of trouble. I was just a kid in the back of the car. Yeah. So I get to Coinomatic, and that's where I do see my brother, Jay. I see him, and he's like, I think he was outside the building, but he saw me, and he was like, he gave me like this like nod or something. If my memory stands corrected, but I'll tell you, I remember when I walked into Coinomatic, it was this old, dusty, old jukebox machines, pinball machine, older machines, not the new ones that were at Saturn's Rings. And he had a back office that walked right into this back office, and that's where Raymond was. And he's like, I walked in, and I walked right into his office like I knew where I was going. Yeah. And he's like, all right, sit down. And I sat there. He had a Pall Mall. My dad smoked Pall Malls. He kind of reminded me a little bit of my dad. Yeah. And he's like, all right, so tell me what happened down there. And so I tell him the story of exactly what happened. Yeah. And he gets on the phone and he says, hold on a second. He picks up this old black phone that he had on his office desk and he calls back to Saturn's Rings. And he says, close the place down and rip out the rugs. As soon as I told him about the static thing, he said, rip out the rugs. And then he hung up the phone. And he says, what are you doing down there spending money on arcade games? So everything was kind of weird because I'm like, dude, you own the arcade. Why would you care? It was like a guy, what are you doing drugs? Like, he's like, what, you don't have a job? What are you doing home? Are you doing homework? What are you doing? And I'm like, well, that's my afternoon. Like, I have a half a day. I like to go and play pinball. And he's like, well, I got a job for you. And he goes, we're going to get you off the pinball and on the pinball or something, he said. And I'm like, he said, you're going to have enough pinball to last you forever. You won't have to pay for pinball. And I got a job for you Wednesday afternoons.
And that's how it started.
And that's how it started. So from 2 weeks later, I went up there and I had nothing. He's like, they gave me a guy that showed me the route. The route started in Fox Point, went all the way down Thayer Street, up Hope Street. I mean, to Wickenden Street, down South Main Street, all the way down South Main Street. It was a nightmare. Yeah. And I was like, how am I going to get these? The guy who showed me, I'm like, how am I going to get these quarters around? He's like, well, you're going to have to figure that out. So I found a red wagon, and that's what I used, buckets in a red wagon. And every Wednesday I would collect the coins, and I had the master key to all the machines. So I would play all the pinball and all the Pac-Man. Pac-Man was just coming out, and it was pretty cool.
Wow. So that's really how it started. He gave you a job.
He gave me a job.
So you were collecting coins for all the
Meaning it was like this
open.
guise of keeping me out of the arcade and out of trouble.
Yeah.
Because obviously I was getting into trouble at the arcade.
Yeah, yeah.
Meaning there was some sense of me getting into trouble.
Yeah.
And they wanted to keep me out of trouble. And let me tell you, it was like every Wednesday they took my half day away. It was a nightmare.
It's not, but you did it anyway. Like, you couldn't say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Well, my mom was like, it was like this, no one told me I had to do it. Yeah. Back then, you just knew there was a vibe. Yeah. Like, you didn't question it. Yeah. You just knew that, I guess I won't be playing pinball anymore. I guess I'll be collecting from the pinball.
I mean,
but I got to play all the free pinball I wanted.
I mean, but it's not something you really wanted to do. You just did it because the adults said you got to do it, and so you did it.
It's not anything I wanted to do.
Yeah.
No. Wasn't walking in December in the coldest fucking day, going walking 3 miles with a wagon, with a bow, a couple 100 pounds of quarters. No, it wasn't fun.
And how much were you bringing in, a day?
Yeah. No, every Wednesday, I guess it was probably 2,000.
You were walking around a red wagon like 11 years old with $2,000 worth of quarters on you?
Yeah. And I had to fucking carry it all the way up Federal Hill. That was a pain in the ass.
What do you
well, you got to remember,
is,
there was a reputation. Every bar I went to open the machine and do this for, there came a reputation on who I was. So by the third round of me doing it, everyone knew who I was.
So no one was going to rob you. Yeah.
Back then, there was a sense of order.
Yeah.
You couldn't just rob somebody.
Yeah.
People would be killed for that.
Yeah, and so they knew who you were.
For instance, Kevin Hanrahan.
Yeah.
They killed him for robbing people.
Yeah.
And he worked for the guy.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later, probably. But at this point, you're still a kid, and you're going around. And now you got this job on Wednesdays where you're hauling around 2,000. But here's the thing. From his perspective, do you think that he was just trying to help his driver's kid brother out? Was it like that, or was there anything that was more kind of?
I think. Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wanted to do the job.
That's what I was. Trying to get to.
I was always. This was the beginning of me doing the job that nobody wanted to do. Yeah. If it was the restaurant and I was the owner and we didn't have a dishwasher and I asked one of my bots, "Will you dishwash for tonight?" No, I gotta go fucking dishwash all night. So I was always the first to not say no or.
Yeah. And for you, it was you got to play.
I was a people pleaser from day one.
Yeah.
I was definitely a people pleaser. Yeah. And I wanted to, I didn't want any problems. Yeah. And you remember my brother Tommy, you know what I mean? I got a few beatings. Before all this happened, I received a few beatings, real beatings. So I didn't question too much.
Yeah.
I didn't want a beating.
No, I think that's part of being the youngest sibling, you're kind of the people pleaser usually.
Yeah.
So anyway, how long did you do this for? How long were you?
2 years.
Were they paying you?
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of money were you making at 11, hauling around quarters for the mob?
I think the first time I made $80-something, my first, and he gave it to me in a little manila envelope.
Yeah.
It said Sean on it.
So he was paying you.
That's he'd give me a percentage. He would, but he wouldn't pay me till the next Wednesday.
Yeah.
I'd turn in the money, and he'd weigh the money on this big old fucking scale. That's how he'd do it. And then they put it in this big fucking spinner.
Yeah.
And, but he wouldn't give me this envelope to the next Wednesday until I came to work. Yeah. It was always in Rhode Island, you didn't get your pay till you came to work that Friday. Because you never know if you were going to come or not.
Yeah. So you're making decent money. That's pretty solid money for a 10
I guess
kid.
It was about $85 a week, I guess.
So what were you doing? What were you doing with all that?
I was just throwing it into my drawer.
You weren't even spending it. You were just saving it up.
I didn't spend too much. I was always busy.
Yeah.
And once they took the pinball away from spending money on pinball, it was candy, I guess.
Yeah. So how many years did you do this for?
2, a little more than 2.
Yeah. Paid vacations, any kind of what kind of perks did they give you in the mob?
Well, the perks came early, just like in Goodfellas.
Yeah, well, tell me about the perks.
Nobody, you just seemed to get a little more respect, or people knew who you were.
Did you notice that, from an early age?
Yeah, it started.
So, at this point, you had no idea you're working for a mob boss, right?
I went to school, and everyone, once I stopped going to the pinball alley on Wednesdays, everyone's like, "What are you doing?" Yeah. Because I was no longer hanging out with my friends on Wednesday afternoon, my friends from school. Yeah. And I said, well, I'm working for this guy Raymond, and I'm collecting quarters, and that's how I found out I was working for the mafia, through my friends at school.
I mean, how long were you doing it? Because if you're 10 or 11 years old, I mean, do you even have a real idea of who the mafia is or anything like that?
It was kind of like a slow turning.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a a rise of a dough almost. Like it just kind of, it just was like,
It just kind of dawned on you.
it dawned on you, yeah.
Yeah, but what did you notice about like not knowing that he's a mob boss, Raymond? Like, what did you notice about? How did you view him at 10 or 11? Like, how did you see him?
I viewed him just like I viewed him like
Just
a lot
as
of
an
other
adult?
guys I knew in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
He smoked a Pall Mall. He was
Yeah.
very direct. He was a scary guy, though. He was a
Yeah.
little more scary than usual. But I looked at him like a business owner,
Yeah,
just
an adult that you're.
And
you,
I
you
had
gotta
I had a little seasoning from being around Elizabeth as such from 7 years old. You got to remember, my mom opened Elizabeth when I was 7. So from the time of 7 to 11, I was already around businesses. I already knew how to make a drink.
Yeah. So you were comfortable with that type of
And
person.
I was adaptable.
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
easily pivot at a young age, I think.
Yeah. So you're in a way you were kind of trained for it beforehand. You know. So the way you saw Raymond was just as a business owner.
Yeah.
Like, he gave you a job.
Yeah, it was nothing more than that.
So when did it start to actually? You said that like it took time, and it was like it started to dawn on you. Like, okay, wait, well, like when? Give me some examples of when that started to like click.
Well, the more I went into each bar, sometimes the bar would give me an envelope that would go along with the quarters. They'd be like, oh, make sure that Raymond gets this. And I was like, what's this for? And I was a kid. I was like, what's this for? You know, because they were giving me additional money.
And that was just tribute money or what?
Whatever it was for.
Protection?
Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not really, you know what I mean? All I knew is that was a red flag. Like, oh, you know, I was like, that's when the beginning of the.
Yeah, you
You
started
know-
noticing something. Oh, that's a little off.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
That's what's so strange about me.
But
About, like,
then after, you know, listen,
Yeah.
after doing this job for a while and going to Federal Hill, it all just, it's learned behavior. It's everything just becomes clear. Everything becomes clear. And at a young age, it came clear to the point where it was a normalcy. Not normal probably for anyone in the audience.
But just for you, when you're around it for long enough, it just feels very normal. There's nothing strange about it, really.
No.
It's just the way things are.
Nothing ever seemed strange the whole journey.
Wow.
It just seemed all normal.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it
No, I
just
believe
seemed,
you.
it just seemed go, I don't know.
It's just like it's just bizarre to me that like a New England mob boss, like the mob boss, that they would run their whole thing out of just like a very everyday kind of, that's like today if like some cholos were running their thing out of like a Chuck E. Cheese. You know what I mean? It's just it's not what you picture.
Listen,
Yeah.
I look at it like this.
Yeah.
Back in the day, that kind of thing of Coinomatic, that
Yeah.
was like, whoa.
Oh really? It had a little
Now
prestige
everybody's
to it?
Coinomatic.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody's got a fucking... we're in Los Angeles. You know how many storefronts have been open for years that haven't done one dime of business? Yeah. Coinomatic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was one
Back
of
in the
those.
day, we were just like a museum. We're like a
Yeah.
museum of the old... You know what I mean? It's
How do
just
they
another-
deal with customers who come in like, hey, I want to buy some vending machines? Are they
No,
just
there
like-
was no customer. If you lived in Rhode Island, you just didn't walk through the door
Okay,
at
I get it.
Coinomatic.
I get it.
That
All right.
didn't happen.
Yeah, yeah.
That was well known that you
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
it wasn't open for business. Like you
Okay.
couldn't go in there
Yeah.
unless you had business there
Yeah,
and were
yeah.
welcome there.
But it's like if a guy like me just walked in, hey, you know, I want to buy a pinball machine. Like, can you show me the latest models? They'd be like, get the fuck out of here. What do you do?
I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
I
think
was wondering
nobody
about that.
ever walked in and
Yeah.
asked for a pinball machine. It was kind of like well known that, you know, you probably didn't want to do that.
That's interesting. All right. So basically, you started hearing it from kids at school. Is that what it was? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you know who you're working for, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of like that?
Yeah.
So then you figured it out at a certain point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then once that happened, then what?
Nothing. Just kept going about doing my modeling on the weekends
Yeah.
and doing the coins on Wednesdays and living my life.
That was just your childhood. All right,
was just
tell
my
us
childhood.
about the modeling a little bit, because that's an interesting thing. Like,
Yeah,
were you a
like-
good-looking kid, or like what was
Yeah,
it?
I was a redhead.
Yeah.
I was like the quintessential. I looked like a mini Boris Becker.
Yeah, I have
I
no
had
idea who
red,
that is.
thick red hair.
Yeah.
I had like freckles all over.
Yeah.
I was like the all-American kid.
Yeah.
You know, white all-American kid.
So, like at the modeling agency, is it like that? Like we need at least 3 gingers in the catalog, and then you were the go-to guy.
Yeah, well, I was in every.
Yeah.
I worked every weekend.
Yeah.
Saturday and Sunday
Sure.
for at least 4 hours every morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were just like, what? Where were you going? You know
Where
what
was I
mean?
going to?
Yeah.
There was a studio right across from where the Hot Club is. It's
Yeah.
now ripped down now, but it used
Yeah.
to be a big warehouse in Boston Modeling.
Yeah.
I guess that was the name. I was trying to remember the name. It was Boston Modeling, and this lady Ruth ran it. And the Boston Modeling was right above Elizabeth's, my mother's business.
So that's how you got connected.
So my mother and this lady, more connections. They had some kind of deal going on, and they got me into modeling.
And you did that for like from what age to what age?
12 or 11 to 15, almost 15.
Did you enjoy doing that?
Not really. Back in the day, the lights they were fucking hot. The lights weren't like they are today. The lights were like, oh my God. And sometimes I'd pass out under the lights. I'd just pass right out. The heat lamp of the lights made me fucking like, and I'd pass out.
And you'd just be on the floor?
Yeah, I'd pass right out. They'd be like, oh, they put water on me, and I'd come back to life.
And what kind of stuff were you modeling? Like clothes?
Oh, clothes for Sears and, J.C. Penney, Jordan Marsh, Underoos. I was the first Underoos guy in the Providence Journal. I used to imagine a redhead in Underoos.
Yeah, that's it. Like that was not something else. But like, were you getting paid for all this?
Yeah.
And
it was put into a trust with my mom.
Okay, so you were working all the time.
All the time I was busy. Yeah. School was taking kind of like, I ended up getting thrown out of Moses Brown because I was so non-focused on school. Yeah. I was focused on everything else. Yeah. So they asked me to leave Moses Brown in 6th grade.
In 6th grade?
No, when I went to go back in 7th, they were like, it's not going to work out.
So would you just enroll like at the public school or something after that?
Oh, I went to Sister Mary Mahoney, my father's sister. Is named Sister Mary Mahoney. Yeah. And she ran St. Patrick's, which was a junior high school on Smith Hill. And they were like, all right, we know Sister Mary will take them. Yeah. So they shipped me up to Sister Mary.
All right. But all this time, all through high school, junior high through high school, you're working for Raymond, basically?
No. I mean, up till high school, Raymond, things started to go south with those guys. I had, by time I was 17, I was kind of doing my own thing on the side. Okay. Raymond was like, there was a lot of legal troubles going on and that stuff. But he died in 84. I believe it was 84 he died.
How old were you when he died? Roughly.
Well, if I remember, he died. It's 84 or 86 he died. Yeah. Maybe even later.
But at that point, you weren't really working for him anymore anyway?
No, it was kind of like, he was dealing with legal troubles. There was all these infractions. There were the Angulo brothers in Boston had been turned on. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I was kind of like, I had got into cocaine. Cocaine had literally, kind of helped sever ties with all that shit in a way. Yeah. With that, until the younger guy, until the other fractions came up and I connected with those guys.
So like you were moving through the ranks, and then the next curveball was cocaine, basically, right? Yeah. All right,
so up to the time until 16, until my first hit of cocaine, everything was pretty innocent. Yeah, working for the guys, but pretty innocent.
Yeah, you weren't getting in trouble.
I was kept out of trouble.
You were kept out of trouble.
But doing, I guess, maybe...
Do you think you would have been in trouble had you not been connected with the mob? You know what I mean? Like, you had that personality where you would get into trouble?
Oh, yeah.
So in a weird way, do you think your mom kind of, like, what did your mom thinking about you working for Raymond? Like, was there any thought about that?
I think it was all good. Everybody was happy. I was happy.
Yeah.
Everyone was on the... there was this... listen, it'd be a lie for me to say my mother my mother played her cards right with all directions. Yeah. You can do that with what you may, but she knew how to play her cards with everybody.
So do you think there was something good about like having you connected like that where,
listen, if you were going to be in Rhode Island and you were going to grow up in Rhode Island, maybe she had the foresight to maybe be on that side than this side.
I get it. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it was,
especially if I was going to be involved in the liquor business in the city of Providence. I was already being primed for a restaurant owner. I was already being primed for some bigger thing.
So she was kind of saying that it's not a bad thing to have this kid just do this job, stay out of trouble, and make a connection and be on the good side of the guys who are really running stuff. Yeah.
And, we didn't look at it like a bad thing. It wasn't looked at like a bad thing.
No, it's kind of weird that, like, it seems like there was a time when the mob was really running things where there was an order, right? And you just accepted things kind of how they are, but there was a level of order and respect.
And if you were involved, you knew you took an order, and that was it. There was no like, oh, I don't think so.
Yeah.
There was none of that. Like if you had crossed that threshold, that blurred line, and you had crossed it, then if someone said, "Hey, man, that was direct," because now you're in. Now you're a penny. You're in for a penny. You're in for a pound.
So did you cross that threshold?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're in there. Yeah. But not as a kid. This happened later. All right. So that's where we're headed. So you were primed to be. You weren't even sure what you're being primed from. Like, so you were modeling. You're working for Raymond. You're basically staying out of trouble. You're staying super busy. And then we got to get into, then the first hit of crack happened and it derailed kind of everything, right?
So when I was 15, early 15, I started smoking weed and started getting my hands on a lot of weed. I had a friend, my brother's friend was providing that weed for me. And I was selling ounces of weed at 15. I turned 16. I go to Block Island for the little bit of my summer. I stopped drinking a little. I come back from Block Island, and not my dentist, but a dentist who lived in the building that my mother owned some condos and my grandmother lived in. His name was Carl. Carl was a dentist in Cranston, but he used to buy weed from me. So I sold him ounces of weed every once in a while. This just started. So he calls me and says, "Hey, I want an ounce of weed." So I bring it over to his condo. It's a fall day. I just got back from Block Island. It was like September. I'll never forget it. I can visually feel the breeze going, like the New England off the bay breeze, because this condominium was right on the bay. I come into the condo, and I drop the weed down, and I see this Pyrex. Like Pyrex is a glass. It's like a glass tube that you can heat up and it won't crack. It's called Pyrex. So I come in, and he's got this crazy zigzag Pyrex thing, and he's got a torch in his hand, and he looks kind of like, like you got to try this. And I thought it was hash. I was like, and when you're young, you're just like, yeah, all right, I'm already smoking. Like, yeah, I didn't even think twice. And he hands me the thing, and then he took it back from me and he heated it up. He heated up this big fucking Pyrex thing, and then he took a rock and he dropped it in, and the rock went in and started smoking and filling up. And he's like, "Okay, now suck." And I sucked that smoke all the way through the zigzag, and I took a big fucking hit. And I opened the sliding glass door and went out into the fall weather in New England and went, and the whole world stopped. And all the trauma that I had, what we just talked about, a lot of it was trauma, had gone away. And I was like, whoa. It was like finding my golden slipper. And not more than 3 seconds after I took the hit, I wanted another one. And I turned around and I was like, I want some. Give me some. And I ended up spending the money that I had used for weed. I took weed money and bought it with weed money, and that was where freebase or crack, whatever you want to call it, took a hold. That's where it was the beginning.
That's how it all started. How old was you? You were 16?
I was 16, yeah.
And you had never experienced anything
No,
like
it was
that?
1982. Yeah. I turned 16 16 in Newport, Rhode Island at the Columbia Suite. And my whole 16 year was very intense. Yeah. And a lot happened that, the whole, drugs, I might have, it was the beginning of a really long battle.
Yeah. I mean, just talking about it now, what does it feel like just to remember that moment?
I feel shame. I feel exonerated because I'm sober. I feel that I hope my story can leave a message with somebody.
I mean, if you were to go back, like, would you have, and you had the choice, would you have said, I'm not touching that stuff, you know?
I don't know.
Because it in a weird way, it's kind of shaped. You've been on this whole journey, and there's a lot that you regret, you know, and a lot of those things. And because you've come out on the other side of it, and we'll get into that soon, does it feel almost like you had to go through that to be able to find yourself, like to get to, you know what I mean? It's one of those complicated things, right? Where,
well, I say there's no coincidences, and as you just heard me tell that story, was there powers at play, that there was a bigger picture? I mean, could I say, where would my life been if I didn't take a hit of crack? I don't know, but I know one thing. I think, in reality, in all honesty, that if you've made a lot of bad decisions in life, we all want to make it to this
one moment.
Yeah, we all want to make it like God wanted me to smoke crack, so this story could be told.
Sure.
Hey, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I probably would have been the mayor of Providence if I didn't become a crackhead. Yeah. I probably would have been going political or something.
But who knows where that would have led you, right?
Yeah. So, but I'm very grateful. Listen, I'm a very grateful man. I wake up every day grateful that, you know, that I managed to come on the other side of it. Yeah. You know?
What's with these, like, dentists, man?
Listen.
They get into the...
Yeah, the dentist
it's always
in the
a
80s,
dentist.
let me tell you something. You don't want to, if you go to an ELO concert in the 80s, there's going to be a bunch of dentists there with fucking pure cocaine.
Yeah. No, the Beatles, too. Like, the Beatles tried acid for the first time because a dentist slipped it into their drinks.
Oh, yeah.
You know, without them even knowing it.
Listen, dentists, you know what I mean? What do they say? They're footloose and fancy free.
Yeah.
They can be a little fool. I mean, listen, there's a lot of dentists out there that are, you know, you type them. You know the ones I'm talking about.
No, but that's why they always rip you off. Yeah. Because they're dope fiends. Now we know the actual reason. This is I didn't need my wisdom teeth pulled. I didn't need a root canal. This asshole was buying crack. Like, can you imagine how many people this dentist was screwing over, like, over time? Anyway, we figured it out now.
You're trying to lead into something?
I don't know. All I'm saying is that, you know, next time your dentist says you need a fill-in, just ask him, you know, what he's smoking. All right. But no, so that's really that was it. That was it. And we're gonna get into this more. Yeah. I think really, you know, it was to get to this because I mean, it's just interesting too to me that there's these kind of like defining moments in your life. One of them is just happen to walk into an arcade and happen to do this little shuffle and figure something out, and how that one little thing set you on a path, like in a weird way that connected you, that in any other setting, maybe you never would have met this guy.
Let's hypothetically say we're in a matrix.
Yeah. That's a very,
I got to be honest with you kids. As I turn 58 and look back at my life, God, I'm like, you know, that story is true. Yeah. And it's almost like it was like written because, you know.
But I think everybody has that. That's what's interesting about it. Like, everybody can look at their life and look at this defining moment. If this hadn't happened, if I hadn't done this, been there at this particular time and place, this whole line of journey, like multiverse, that idea, right? Like it could have gone in an infinite number of directions, but for whatever reason, this was a point where it made it go in this particular direction. And you have multiple points like that throughout your life.
My personality as a kid was a people pleaser. I was eager to fucking, you know what I mean? So all of the ingredients were there for the drug addict, you know what I mean? And remember, cocaine is a very powerful drug if you put it in smokable form and give it to a 16-year-old. Yeah. His brain is not grown. He's not aware of anything that's going on. So bottom line is, from that one hit, I didn't look at girls until I was 18. Why? Why would I need a girl? I had the best girlfriend in the world. Her name was pure cocaine.
It was just all consuming.
All consuming. There was no reason for girls, anything. It was all consuming. It was about being by myself and being in this land of crack. Yeah. of smoking coke, and it was a very isolated land. It was almost like you were. I think it taught me how to be rogue. It taught me how to be a one-man band. If you know me, I don't travel with anybody. You know what I mean? I don't have people around me.
No, we were talking about this earlier, like this idea that, some of the most resilient, like people, former crackheads, like you're going to learn to be industrious and resilient.
I can't tell you how many recovered guys I know in New England that are millionaires now because they were great at what they did, got into crack, lost it all, got sober, and you give these resilient people real jobs and they transfer that energy into business and forget about it. You're dealing with a monster. Yeah. And if you haven't smoked crack and you're going up against who's sober from crack, I would be very wary and be on your toes. Yeah. Don't underestimate that man. Yeah. No. Crack, when you call someone a crackhead, it's first thing you do that's kind of underestimating them. Yeah.
No, but I mean, you've been through, you've gone through a lot to get some crack, like, and we'll get into it more. But that's what I'm talking about. That industriousness.
Yeah, there's some real funny stories of me getting crack.
So we're gonna get into that in the upcoming episodes. But it was really about figuring out like the beginnings, how all this stuff started. And obviously the stories. You got so many stories about those years, and then everything that's come after it. But I mean, let me ask you something about the dentist. Do you really see him as like? I mean, this guy gave a 16-year-old kid his first hit of crack. Well,
listen. Let's get down to cocaine. Yeah. Cocaine was a very expensive drug. It was $60,000 a kilo in 1982. Yeah. Okay? That means if you're smoking crack and you're a dentist, no matter what, you're smoking $300 a day. Yeah. So it wouldn't be beyond to turn a kid on to crack who might be able to sell some coke in the neighborhood. Yeah. I think it was a greed thing. Wow. I think he turned me on because he knew listen, I had done it. Yeah. And I'll tell the story down the road, but I had turned people on to crack knowing that they were going to get addicted and knowing they were coming to me for it. I just used them as a vehicle to get more crack.
So he might have been going.
He was looking in this, and his dream came true because I started selling blow from him. I started doing a lot.
Yeah. But that's how like intense that addiction is that it's not even that he's trying to use you to get rich.
That addiction is so intense that I feel right now like I just took a hit of crack. Like it can really, it's such a psychological drug that it can really, it's overwhelmingly powerful. Even since 95.
That's when you stopped.
Yeah.
Jesus. No, I mean, I just can't even imagine. I think heroin is also a similar in that way where that's like what chasing the dragon is, right? Like after that first experience, they spend the rest of their lives or whatever their time of their addiction trying to feel that again because it's so intense and so... I mean, it's probably a feeling you should never feel, No,
it's definitely a feeling you should never feel, especially, it's just one of those things that God has not intended you to feel that unless there was some probably very special purpose. Yeah. But, it was just too good.
But that's like the nefariousness of the addiction, because even with the dentist, like he was so addicted to crack that he wanted to get you addicted to crack so he could get more crack. It wasn't.
I would say that was in the
really
bigger picture.
Yeah,
I would say that was in his horizon.
So the addiction, and you can speak on this a little bit, but the addiction is what fuels that kind of immoral, terrible behavior.
Absolutely,
you're being driven by this monster.
I watched crack and freebase. It's all the same. Yeah. And I'll get into why they call it crack and freebase. I remember this one guy, I watched people, Ronnie Oakes, the owner of 3 nightclubs in Providence, very successful. Got into cocaine 4 or 5 years into it, devastated. Yeah. The list goes on and on and on about successful guys in the 80s who had it all and lost it. Like I knew one guy, he was a lawyer in 82. In 89, he was sucking cock on Broad Street. I saw guys who you'd never think who had it all, and including had it, lost it over 20 times.
But it's the addiction. It's that intense.
It's that intense, and at the time in the 80s, it was almost like this privileged addiction that in the 80s everything was opulent. We deserve this. You know what I mean? And everything was gimme, gimme, gimme. It was really kind of a weird time that I look back at.
Yeah. Break down like this. So Richard Pryor is another example, obviously, of that. Someone who had everything.
So look at this. The list goes on and on. Yeah. David Crosby sold his Mercedes to a guy for coke. Yeah. The guy died with the Mercedes and the pink slip in the house. David went in the house, got the pink slip while the guy was dead, and went and sold the car again. This is a rock star. Yeah. Doesn't discriminate.
I mean, it's interesting. Like every era has their drug. That was the era of cocaine, crack, all that. I feel like probably 2000s was like meth, right? And then obviously OxyContin and like all the opiates and stuff like that. So it's such a bizarre thing, but I think that experience, everything you're talking about, is probably something that a lot of people can understand who've been through it. But it's also, it's probably a feeling that ideally you should never feel, because it's just gonna.
And listen, it's not an easy way back to normal happiness. When you smoke crack for 13 years, getting back your normal dopamine cycle, because crack unloads the bank account of dopamine. It just lets it out every hit, and then you got to build more, and your body can't build as much dopamine as you're flowing out with the crack. So it's like, and then you're like, it's like you're just chasing this little bit of dopamine. So over years, it took me 5 years to actually be happy. To find like, oh my God, I took a shit, I'm happy. Like 5 years. Like I didn't know what happiness was. I went through anger, all of this like stringing of taffy of emotions of like, I didn't know where I was. And then one day I started to, but my brain took 5 years for it to normally have dopamine. And dopamine, for the layman out there, is just having a normal day, having a nice day with Mark and a laugh, having just a normal, good, clean, fun day, like I have at Fourth Wall all the time. Yeah. That's good, clean fun. That's when my dopamine comes out now.
So you were able to find it, but it took a long time.
A long time.
I mean, really, from 16.
And that's why people relapse on crack.
Yeah.
And I'll just only speak on crack because you need the dopamine in order to survive. Yeah. You need to have some happiness, or you just go into depression. Yeah. And how I made it through all the depressing times, but for the grace of God.